Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show, right here on voiceamericamedia.com, America's Voice. We've been on the air on this particular program on this network for 24 years. I've been on many other networks, all different kinds, over the years, but I've always stayed with Voice America as a program because this is the program that really helps you turn your problems into solutions, your obstacles into opportunities, and make your dreams come true. And today we're talking about something that, has been brought to mind recently in the last few years, and that's revisiting and looking at the Holocaust. We often think that when something has been gone for as many years, now almost 80, that, we may have forgotten, but we never forget. And today, which we are doing this show live, today on April 13th, 2026, is Holocaust Remembrance Day around the country and around the world. And we have a guest who's going to talk about this. She's written an incredible novel, but it's really based, there's a lot of fact in this novel. And it's really about resilience during the Holocaust, devastation, but it's also about hope. It's about how can we move through this. And we see this through the eyes of two talented, courageous young girls. And it shows us how to be brave and how to be resilient in the face of evil. And my guest today is Ellen Shapiro. Ellen M. Shapiro is a graphic designer and writer. She's a graduate of UCLA's College of Fine Arts. She's headed a graphic communications firm for over 20 years and taught in leading design schools, including the designer and author of the MFA program and New York School of Visual Arts. She's a contributing editor for Print Magazine and writer for printmag.com. She has published hundreds of articles and posts and 2 nonfiction books about visual culture around the world. Inspired by her mother's memories of the Holocaust in Vienna and life in wartime England, Ellen's new book is The Secret Buttons, and it's her first novel. Welcome, Ellen. Great to have you.
Thank you so much, Patricia. It's great to be here.
Tell us, what was the inspiration for writing this book? Was it your mother?
Yes, there were 2 inspirations. The first inspiration was my mother, who was a refugee from pre-war Nazi-occupied Vienna, Austria, to England on a domestic servant visa. And the one thing that I remember so clearly that she told me when I was 10 years old was this one sentence, when I crocheted around diamonds and turned them into buttons that refugees wore on the boats to America. And then she never told me any more than that, and she died 20 years ago.
And you never found out what that really meant?
Through research, I did. Through research, I found out that people did hide diamonds and other valuables, not only in sweater buttons, which was what she was referring to, because she was a knitter and always knitting and had a knitting shop for most of my life.
Wow.
But in the hems of coats, in shoes between the inner lining, and the sole. So why? Because there was war during the Second World War in the UK where she was. There was a law that no valuables or currency could leave the country. It was all needed for the war effort.
So she was the one who sewed these precious gems into clothing.
That's what she told me, that there were a number of refugees, that the family that she was staying with during the war in England, they wanted to bring them. They'd already brought them, like my mother, from Austria or Germany, Poland, other Nazi-occupied countries to England. And some of these people had, before the borders were closed, had sent money to this cousin, this uncle, to keep in the Bank of England. Now,
Interesting.
should they be lucky enough to get passage to America with affidavits for employment, and
Hmm.
passports and visas and so forth, how are they going to get their money? Because it was illegal to take money or valuables out of the UK during wartime.
Wow.
Now, that I
So,
found out through research to say, was there really a story here? Yes, there
yes.
was.
Now, your mother was never in the Holocaust, correct? She was not in a camp. So
She was,
she
no,
escaped all that.
she was not in her camp, but my grandfather was. So
Mm,
my mother was a child when my grandfather was taken to Dachau. She
mhm.
also experienced the Holocaust from the point of view of Kristallnacht, that she was living
Yes.
in Vienna when all the
Yeah.
shops were smashed and the synagogues were burned. She was
Mm,
there earlier than that, the Anschluss, which meant that Germany took over Austria, became part of Germany, and all the anti Jewish or pro Aryan
mm,
laws that were in effect
yeah.
were suddenly in effect in her city of Vienna.
Yeah. So she experienced that as a child, which is interesting because you write this novel from the perspective of girls, right? Which
Right.
probably would have been around the same age that she was there.
She was she was 10 years, at least 10 years older.
Yeah.
She was in her early 20s
Mm,
when she came to England on her domestic servant visa. But
yeah.
the first thing I learned about writing a children's book is that it's important that the protagonists, the main characters, be the same age as the reader. So that took quite a lot of figuring out on my part. How is a 12-year-old, 13, the ages that my characters were in the book going to be able to pull this off
So,
in a realistic way?
so Ellen, would you say this book is for children and teens, or is it an adult book, or is it both?
What I like to say is it's for everyone age 10 and older.
Okay.
That 10-year-olds are about the age, at least in religious schools, where they're ready to read about and learn about the Holocaust. They're curious about it.
Mm,
I was teaching at a fifth through seventh graders at a religious school at a synagogue near here. They didn't like any of my classroom ideas, homework assignments. They didn't want to be there. They were a tough bunch. Finally, I asked, "What do you want to learn about?" And the answer was the Holocaust. And
isn't that
so
interesting?
this book that I'd started and actually put aside, this was 2 years ago, got me to,
Yeah.
yes, now I know who
So,
the audience is. It's kids like this. Everything they've seen, it's all about death camps. It's about selections of
mm,
people
mm.
entering Auschwitz. It's about crematorium. I wanted to write about the Holocaust in a way that was realistic, but more gentle and
And
more appropriate for that age group.
that was my question. That was meant, I'm going to ask it again because I'd like you to elaborate. How was this book written for that age? How did you take these, incredibly dark incidents that were scary and frightening, and how were you able to put them into a book that kids could embrace without being scared? Now, they might still be scared, but how did you do that, Ellen? Because you've written nonfiction books. How did you do that?
How did I do
How
that?
did you craft this?
I crafted it by first of all, figuring out what scenes are going to be most important. What do I want these kids to learn about? Not necessarily about extermination camps. I purposely ended the book 2 years before actual the crematoria at
Hmm.
Auschwitz were even open. But
Hmm.
lots of things happen to children prior to that, such as having their names changed, such as they can't ride their bikes anymore, such as going to the park to go ice skating, the first memory that Anni has in the book. and then there's a big sign that says "Forbidden to Jews." She can't go
Mm-hmm.
in. But the kids that fit the descriptions of the Aryan youth that are blonde, blue-eyed, etc., they're in there skating. So how did I write it? I tried to, once I knew what I wanted the scenes to depict,
Yes.
backing up and putting myself in there, closing my eyes and saying, okay, I am 11 years old and I
Mm.
just finished my first sweater and I'm going to the park and I want to show off my
Wow.
twirls. And I see this sign
Wow.
that says no Jews allowed with a big swastika, because that's what those
Well,
signs exactly looked like. How did I feel? What would I say? What would I do? And
mm,
so I wrote every scene like that. How would I feel? What would I say? What would I do? And how
mm,
could it lead to the next kind of exciting thing happen in this book
mm.
that's going to be challenging to the characters that they have to figure out what to do about it?
Yeah. Was that hard to do? Because that's very different from writing nonfiction.
Was it
Or
hard
was
to
it
do?
liberating, or was it both?
It wasn't easy, but once in, I figured out inside how to do it, it was rewarding, it was challenging. I also had other people reading it. Does this work for you? Do you
Mm,
understand it? Does this make sense that this character would do this? So
mm.
every author needs what are called beta readers, readers who read drafts of the book
Yeah.
before it's
Yeah.
published, and who could say, I don't think that this scene is exciting enough, or I don't think she would have reacted that way.
Mm,
She's not emotional enough, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah. It's interesting because the book that I think of, in terms of um, young girls or young people, is the Diary of Anne Frank. And that was a very powerful book. As you know, it's been made into plays. It's been well read. So, what? How would you compare that to this? Because that was seen through the eyes of a young girl. So,
Right.
talk about kind of what they saw through their eyes.
What the reader saw.
Yeah. No, what the girls saw in the
Well,
book.
okay, what the girls saw through their eyes was very different than what Anne Frank saw.
Okay.
And there was just recently an Anne Frank exhibit in New York City, which I visited, which was just so moving and beautiful to visit. And I thought, how this is a character, Anne Frank, who has left us with so much, but she is not a character who makes things happen. Unfortunately,
Hmm.
she speaks from her heart. She writes about her feelings. She's just like, I think what's lovely and universal about Anne Frank is she's like every other girl her age. She has crushes. She has a fight with her sister. It's
Hmm.
she seems so human, so normal, and
Hmm.
then she doesn't live, and then she gets taken away to a camp herself and dies of typhoid. So I
Hmm.
wanted characters who lived. I wanted characters that were going to move the plot forward and not be a victim in the sense that their lives were ended, but being a victim, being a character that could move forward not only from Vienna to England, but from England to the United States and settle with their family, what's left of it in Brooklyn, and start a knitting table, just like the ones that their
Hmm.
grandmothers of blessed memory had in Vienna, but now with their multicultural American friends. So
Hmm.
to make it an immigration story that ends up in America with not the happiest ending, because blackouts are going to start. America thinks that, Mayor LaGuardia is sending around notices, turn off your lights at night, cover up the street signs.
Mm.
Put blackout curtains in your apartments, everybody along the coast. This is just what they went through in England, thinking they'd come to America, and it's starting all over again. Yet they're characters who made a difference. They're characters who improved other people's lives through what they accomplished in England.
Mm. So you see this as inspirational for anyone who reads this because it's looking at resiliency.
I hope so. It's
Share with us
inspirational for parents and kids to read together, for teachers and students to read together.
Share with us, without giving it away, Ellen, just tell us one thing in the book that, with one of the girls, that you felt was an inspirational point. I know there's many.
The one that strikes me right now as the most inspirational is the chapter called The Interrogation, where Anni has to interrogate the Nazi soldier who bailed out of his plane above their village, my fictional
Wow.
village of Tuppinshire, England. And in the book, I show an air fight. Maybe I should hold this up very quickly. That
And did you illustrate this
I did
yourself?
not illustrate it. I hired a most wonderful illustrator named
Oh,
Caterina
isn't that
Baldi,
beautiful?
and she lives in Italy. And we did all our illustrations together through a website called Reedsy, reedsy.com, that hooks up authors with editors and illustrators. So here we have this air fight of the Nazi plane and the British plane over their village of Tuppinshire, and three soldiers bail out, Nazi soldiers. Two of them
Okay.
are dead. One of them is taken to the church in their village. And the vicar's wife runs over and says, Anni, you speak German. Nobody here speaks German. We have to interrogate the soldier. She's not only
Wow.
scared, it's a pretty scary thing. She escaped the Nazis. And as her little sister pointed out, in Vienna, the Nazis' boots were on the ground. Here they're in planes in the air. They're not
Wow.
close to us like we can smell the shoe polish and the sweat. So no, don't worry. There's going to be some British officers there. They've got guns. You can do it, Annie. You can do it. So she goes in this chapter from being frightened and still not sure of her English. Remember, she's just gotten to the point where she communicates very well in English, but now she has to question the soldier. And I had to do research on interrogation techniques, and read scripts of interrogation techniques and figure out how do I put this interrogation from this point in history into the book and make it like a
Wow.
13, 14-year-old girl could do it. And she comes out of it wiser, older, in a way more
Hmm.
more sure of herself. It was a
Amazing.
major learning experience for Anni Blum. And she's
What
a
a
heroine
story.
too.
What a story. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about this amazing book that you've written. It's fictional, but has so many lessons in it. It's called The Secret Buttons, and it's a novel by Ellen Shapiro. And it's about Anni Blum, who's 12 years old when she and her little sister Rosie travel alone to rural England from Nazi-occupied Vienna, Austria. Their father's in a concentration camp, and their mother cannot get the right papers to enter another country. So it's all about this, but it's all about resilience and hope as well. Stay tuned, folks. You're listening to the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show right here on VoiceAmericaMedia.com. We'll be right back. Well, hello, everyone, and we are back. Fascinating story today. We're talking to Ellen Shapiro, who's the author of The Secret Buttons. It's a novel, but it's based on a lot of historical facts and surroundings. And it's also inspirational in a time that was the opposite of inspirational, very, very dark. And this was the time of the Holocaust. And today is Holocaust Remembrance Day, because today is April 13th, 2026. And synagogues all over the world are celebrating this celebration, which is, I think, now 80 years old. And I think that's my question, Ellen, is why now? It's been 80 years and we still talk about it, but it's been a while. Why was this important for you to write now for children of our generation?
That is a great question, Patricia. I think there are two major reasons. One is
Okay.
there are very few actual Holocaust survivors living, and we
Yes.
must never forget. And we must listen to their children and grandchildren and great grandchildren. So to keep the memory of the Holocaust alive. It's alive in Israel, as you just mentioned. It's Yom HaShoah, the day of the great catastrophe, in which Israel has a moment of silence, and every radio and TV program there is tuned to only to Holocaust programming, so the people who live there will never forget. The other
Mm,
reason is the Jews were picked out, not just the Jews, I have to say, that of the people that the Nazis wanted to eliminate included the Roma people, whom we still call gypsies, who wandered around Eastern and Central Europe in camps, didn't settle into the cities and become professionals, people with very dark skin, people with facial features that didn't fit the Aryan ideal,
mm,
homosexuals who had to wear a
mhm,
special upside down pink triangle on their uniforms in
mm,
the camps, and handicapped people, people with severe handicapping conditions. They had no part in Hitler's ideal society. So, what's
mm,
happening in this country? Why is this coming up now? That it seems that people with different ethnic backgrounds, different language, native languages, who, quote, don't have the right papers, just like the Jews didn't, are being picked up
mm,
and sent to camps. There's a parallel there that lots and lots of people see that is quite disturbing.
mm.
And they're protesting.
So, right. So in writing this, and I think that's important that you said that. In writing this, what do you hope that young girls, not just adults, but young girls reading this will get out of it? What would be your hope that somebody reads it and comes to you and says, Ellen, this this book inspired me.
I will pick to one scene at the end of the book. Finally, Annie and Rosie are in New York, reunited with their parents, and they take the subway into Manhattan. And they each had gotten as a gift for for crocheting 10 diamonds into buttons, making them into buttons and sewing them to sweaters that a boatload of refugees was able to wear on the boats to America. They each got their own heart-shaped diamond as a gift when they got
Oh,
to come to America. And they take it to Izzy, the diamond and a diamond merchant on 47th Street in Manhattan. And this was when 47th Street, now a street of diamond exchanges for the whole block
hmm,
between, I think, 5th and 6th and maybe even 7th Avenue, from floor to ceiling. But the diamond merchants who had escaped Nazi occupied Holland, Belgium, and so forth were moving to New York. And my characters take their buttons there and they unravel them. And he looks at them in his glass and said, I will, after some negotiations, etc., I will give you each $1,500, which was a huge amount of money at that time,
Mhm.
1941.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then he asked them, what will you do with the money? And Annie says, I want to open a knitting shop. No, no, a whole chain of knitting shops to teach
Mm.
American immigrants how to knit, how to make beautiful
Yeah.
sweaters for themselves. And Rosie, the little one who loved animals and dogs and sheep and all of this all the way along, she never met an animal that she didn't, a bug that she didn't want to make into a pet, says, I want to be a veterinarian. And Izzy says, that's very difficult. Young girls can't go to, veterinary school, all of those science classes. Oh, don't you want to stay home and be a mom and have kids, have babies and knit sweaters for them? This is the same thing my mother told me. By the way, you want to go to UCLA? Don't you want to
Yeah.
get married and have babies right now? No, not really, Mom. I want to go to UCLA. Anyway, little Rosie stands up for herself and she said, I am going to be a veterinarian and I'm getting all A's in science and math. And then she whispers to her sister, and Mr. Izzy better mind his own business. So that's how I want to inspire girls today.
Wow. Well,
Is
that's
look,
easy to
those
do
those
because,
those stereotypes, those gender
right,
stereotypes, they
right.
still live. They should
They
not live.
they they do, but they don't live the way they did before. I mean, there's so much opportunity for women now, that we never saw. I mean, when I was growing up, and I'm a baby boomer, when I was growing up, there were some women doctors and some women lawyers, but it was rare. There
That's
were a
right.
few. I mean, we had, and it was a big deal. It was like, really? And now it's very, very common. So I think women have made their mark in so many things, in government, in politics, in medicine, in law, in engineering, in space. So in so many ways. But I really, it's wonderful to hear you talk about this, and really look at this because it sounds like you've given it a lot of thought, in terms of how we can encourage children. And most books, which you kind of alluded to, don't frame this in this way from a child's point of view, from exploration. I mean, you could have written a book. I mean, when I read this part where it says their father's in a concentration camp and their mother cannot get to the right papers in another country. Well, you could have written this book in a totally different way. It could have been their struggle and their strife and all of the things that they went through, their search for their parents. I mean, it could have been all of that. And that may be a little bit in there, but you really focused on how they could make a life for themselves.
Yes, thank you. Maybe thinking back to what I just said about Rosie. Okay, I totally agree with you. Now we have women astronauts and who just came back and women on the Supreme Court and probably more women in law school and medical school than men these days. But there's somebody who's always going to tell you, you can't do that. You're
Mhm.
not smart enough. You got diagnosed with dyslexia. What else? There could be a bunch of reasons that someone tells you you can't do that, and they could look at Annie and Rosie as characters who did.
Yes.
Who did what
Now
people
in
said you can't do.
now in the book, and I don't want to spoil this for people if you want to share, do they find their parents or one of their parents, or do you not want to share that?
Oh, and I'm happy to share that they are reunited with their parents on Ellis Island, New York on the 4th of July. And
Wow.
fireworks are in the air. And at first they think, and everybody on their ship, which was a troop ship, I actually,
Mm.
for research for that, is I met someone who came to America on a troop ship and told me what it was like. That the beds were hammocks hanging from bolted into the ceiling. And when
Wow.
the ship hits rocky waters, not only are everybody seasick, but their hammocks are swinging around. So, that kind of research is just leads to writing a very vivid chapter. But they arrive and they think the fireworks are for them. Oh, our ship arrived. And then they have to learn American culture the same way they learned English culture.
Yeah.
It's the 4th of
Yeah.
July. We have fireworks every year.
Yeah.
It's not for you, you know.
Yeah.
It's the
But it
birthday of the
sounds
United
like,
States. Didn't you know about that? No.
but it sounds like from what you characterize them, that even if they hadn't found their parents, they already had enough strength and independence that one of them wanted to be a veterinarian, the other one wanted to open up sewing shops. So they learn that on their own without having their parents.
Okay, they learned that on their own and guided by the family they lived with and others that they met in
Yes.
Tuppinshire, their fictitious city in, village in England. But I think their number one goal in the whole book was getting reunited with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And even when Annie meets the boy, the sheep farmer on the hill, who's so attractive, and she has a crush on him, and she's even thinking, do I really want to go to America? Don't I want to stay here and forget about being at the time she thought she wanted to be a famous dress designer. I don't want to be a dress designer anymore. I want to live on the farm off the earth. But
Mm-hmm.
then, her parent, she didn't, she, it was a thought that crossed her mind. She
Yeah.
really wanted to come to America
Yeah.
and be reunited with her
Yeah.
parents.
Yeah.
And Papa, his teeth were knocked out in the camp. He
Mm-hmm.
walks with a cane.
Mm-hmm.
Mutti, their mother, has gray hair and she's a little bit sadder than she had been before, but
Mm-hmm.
they're alive.
Mm-hmm.
The grannies didn't
Yeah.
make it, but they
Yeah.
they're reunited with their parents, and that's
Ellen, go,
where
go
on.
ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, they're reunited with their parents, and they learn from in discussions
Right.
more about what happened to their grannies and other
So,
people who didn't make it.
so here's my question based on what you just said. If your mother were alive, what would she say about all this? What would be her take on this book and on your work? Tough questions
Oh
I'm asking here, huh?
boy. I didn't look like that. I never said that to you. What else? I never said I didn't want you to go to college. Did you tell somebody on a radio show about that? That's not true. Um, no,
But about the book, about the book.
she would be proud of me. And she would be proud that her Tyrolean sweater, this was a pattern that she devised, and I don't have one here with me, but maybe you can see a little bit
Yeah,
of it here
yeah,
with the
yeah,
embroidered flowers. And
yes.
that was her signature sweater in her knitting shop. There was always one up on a mannequin.
Mm,
And, it wasn't fashionable for me to wear in middle school or high school. But now I have one and I really treasure it. She sold that pattern to the Spinner and Company, and it's in a knitting book that I was finally able to get from on eBay, an original copy of it. And she would be very proud that her sweaters and some of the things that she did, like if she wanted to make a new sweater, often she didn't buy yarn. She unraveled old sweaters and made them into balls. And I
wow,
have my characters doing that in Vienna. They have
wow,
too, because
wow,
just like
wow.
all the currency and valuables are needed for the war effort, so is all the yarn to make sweaters for the
Yeah,
soldiers. And
yeah.
so I have these patchwork sweaters, which my characters are knitting in this scene with the
Isn't
curtain
that
church
great?
ladies.
Isn't
These
that great?
patchwork sweaters all made from different types of yarn that are, you know, made from ripping
That's
old
amazing.
sweaters.
Ellen, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about knitting. We're going to test
Okay.
that's a central part of your book. It was certainly a central part of your mother's experience, but it's a
Hmm.
part of your book and your novel. So we're going to talk about that after the break. You're listening
Okay,
to the
great.
Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show right here on VoiceAmericaMedia.com. We're talking to Ellen Shapiro. She's the author of The Secret Buttons, and it's an incredible novel based on historical fact around the Holocaust and people who survived and what their lives were like and how that worked for them. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. Hi, everyone. We are back. We're talking to Ellen Shapiro about her amazing novel called The Secret Buttons. And it's about two teenagers who travel alone to rural England from Nazi-occupied Vienna, Austria. Their father's in a concentration camp, and their mother cannot get the right papers to enter another country. And so it's the borders are closed to Jews, and the girls depart to live with cousins wearing silk dresses that their mother remade to disguise them as Aryan holiday travelers. And Ellen's been talking a lot about the book and a lot about how knitting is a central theme. So we're going to talk about that. Ellen is a graduate of UCLA's College of Fine Arts, and she's headed a New York graphic communications firm for over 20 years. This is her first novel. Pick it up, everyone. Where can you get this book? Let's start there.
You can get this book on Amazon in 4 different formats. There's hardbound and a premium soft cover, and there's also a paperback that looks like this that's very popular, and an ebook. And you can also get it on my Etsy shop where I can send you signed copies. And it's called The Alphagram, ALPHAGRAM shop.etsy.com. And if you want to get it at your local bookstore, because the paperback was published through Ingram Spark, they'd be happy to order it for you.
Which would be wonderful. And the big book, which is the picture book, is some of the pictures you were just showing us. And so people can get that as well. But if they buy a
Yes.
certain quantity of the soft cover, right? I think you said that you donate the larger book.
Yes. I'm going to put an offer on in my Etsy shop today that if you buy, especially if you are a school or synagogue, if you buy 10 books, paperbacks for $10.95, I will send you a free hardbound copy for your library.
Right.
And the hardbound copy has, let me just pick one quickly at
beautiful
random.
pictures.
Here are the kinds of illustrations.
Beautiful.
Double page, 16 beautiful double page illustrations by Italian illustrator, painter Caterina Baldi, and about 50 spot illustrations, like the small spot that you see here. The girls go to their favorite knitting shop after Kristallnacht in a memory, and it's all smashed, and they don't know where the owner is.
But now we're going to talk about the knitting. Now let's talk about the sweater that you just put on. Tell us all about that and then talk about the knitting. We've got probably about 10 minutes more, and I really want to hear about this. Go ahead.
Okay, all about it. This was my mother's. So my mother owned a knitting shop in Inglewood, California, where I grew up, for, I'm going to say, about 30 years. And this was her signature style. And there was always one up on a mannequin there. And she actually sold the pattern to the Spinnerin Company, which is a company that made like pattern books like this one, and sold and made yarn. And they bought her design, and I managed to get this catalog on eBay that has her original design in it. Now, there's this very special design with these, I think I should stand up a little bit, sort of diamond-shaped patterns.
Wow.
With embroidered flowers in the middle of them. And so there are some, it's called the Tyrolean sweater, and you can buy Tyrolean sweaters on Etsy and other sources. Someone apparently bought her exact pattern and knitted it and sold it on Etsy, and I bought it. And I'm wearing it.
Isn't
My
that
mom's
great?
design.
Isn't that beautiful? Wonderful. Wow. So, Ellen, let's talk about a little more about knitting and how that's such a central theme.
So knitting is a central theme because it was a central theme in my mom's life. And I'm going to start by showing you this picture from the book. And by the way, all the pictures are in the paperback edition 2, but smaller and in black and white. While the girls are on the train, squashed into a seat next to a man reading the Nazi newspaper and chuckling about how soon Europe will be free of Jews, Anni is remembering
Wow.
the knitting table that she had to leave behind with her two grannies and her mother, and every on Sunday afternoon with laughter, with gossip, and with delicious Viennese pastries. And then when she is in England, oh, help me find this, please. She is knitting this very sweater, which my illustrator photographed, or I photographed and sent to my illustrator, Katerina Baldi, who worked it into the picture. And then she's figuring out how to help Uncle Benjamin with his dilemma.
Mm.
And after she figures out how that she could actually crochet around a diamond and make it into a button, he gives her another challenge. Can you knit 10 sweaters in 2 weeks? How is she going to do that? There's no yarn in England. So she organizes a knitting party of the church ladies of Tuppinshire, England, and they all knit patchwork sweaters made from
Wonderful.
yarn unraveled.
I know that was amazing when you talked about that. All right, Ellen, we've
And
got a couple minutes left. So tell us what's your message? What's your message to young girls, to adults, to older adults? What is your message of writing this wonderful novel?
be a friend to all immigrants in America, no matter where they come from. So I'm showing you the last color illustration taking place in Brooklyn, New York, with the girls' multicultural group of friends, an immigrant from China, an immigrant from Italy, immigrants from Puerto Rico. Plus they are from Vienna, Austria. So, and they're boys. By the way, this is not the girliest of books. Even though there's lots of knitting and sewing, I've got air fights and I've got boy cousins and boy neighbors, and they are playing football and they're doing stamp collecting and they are stealing knitting needles to to practice fencing and shooting bows and arrows with. So I didn't want to make it a totally girly book. But my message is this is an immigration story, and we're in the middle of an immigration story right now that could turn out much better than it looks by appreciating what American immigrants do for us, and that our country a lot runs on their labor, and we need them, and we want to appreciate them and keep opening the gates by the Statue of Liberty and welcoming them to our country, and making them welcome here and appreciated.
Thank you, Ellen, for a very inspirational interview. And there aren't a lot of books for young girls in this vein. And there's so many lessons in there, as you said, about work ethic, about friendship, about trust, about resilience, about unity. I mean, there's a lot about helping others. So thank you so much. And again, people can log on to your website. What is your website?
My website is visuallanguage.net with one L.
Okay.
VISUALANGUAGE.net. And there's lots of information about me, my other writing, my design work, and so forth. And also, of course, links to buy the book.
Thank you very much, Ellen. It was
Thank
inspirational.
you very much. Thank you so
Particularly
much.
on Holocaust Remembrance Day. Thank you. Stay on the line for a minute. All right, folks, that wraps up this edition of the Patricia Raskin Positive Living Show right here on voiceamericamedia.com. To find me, if you'd like to get a copy of my newsletter so you can see these wonderful guests like Ellen, the newsletter comes out the first the first day of every month, and in it is a description of the guests that we have on throughout the month. You can also go to voiceamericamedia.com as well. If you are interested in creating your own podcast, you hear these positive messages and you'd like to create a series. I've interviewed over 6,000 people in my career and I'd love to help you. Contact me, Patricia@patriciaraskin.com. Remember, stay healthy, stay happy, get the support you need, and know you can make your dreams come true. Until next time, I'm Patricia Raskin. Bye for now.